Daf Yomi, Tractate Menachot, page 27. Starting the bottom of page 20, stuff 26, Chav Vav Amud Beis, with the words Boi Rav Yitzchak Nafcha. Okay, 26b. Okay, the very bottom of 26b. Boy, Rav Yitzchak Nafcha, Ivorin. Shesidron mitzidem ha'ocho mahu. Aliben mandom al mamash lo tibaylach. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha raises a dilemma with regard to the limbs of an offering that a priest arranged adjacent to the arrangement of wood on the altar. What is the halacha? The Gemara explains, do not raise the dilemma according to the opinion of one who says that the phrase upon all the wood is meant literally. Now we turn to 27a on the top with the words De'al ha'etzim kisiv. De'al ha'etzim kisiv, as upon all the wood is written and not next to the wood. Ki tiboylach libed manda amar al besamuch mai hachanami al besamuch v'idima al ha'etzim Dumya de'al ha'mizbeach ma hasuman mama al mamash af hachanami al mamash teiku. This is the 237th teiku in the Babylonian Talmud. I've been keeping track of these teikus since the very first one on 8a at the bottom, about 2 lines from the bottom, Amr of Papa, and started this teiku journey on the 19th day of June. Some people call it Juneteenth, June 19th of 2025, which was the 23rd day of Sivan of the year 5785, and that was 236 full days ago, but today is the 237th day, or you could say 237 days ago if you include today. So 237 days ago, which is including today, I started to document all the teikus based upon the work of Rabbi Aharon Yehoshua Pessin, who wrote a book by that name, Teiku. It's a compilation of all the teikus. Very interesting idea. And when I first heard it, I can even remember when I first heard this idea. It was in the Daf Yomi of Eli Stefanski in around January or so of 2020. And we had just started this new cycle. And we came to Daf 8, Daf Ches Amud Aleph in Brachos, and the first teiku in the Shas is on Brachos Daf Ches, Amr of Papa Beim Sukal Psuka Mahu. It has to do with leaving during laning, and the question was, not allowed to leave during when the chazan is during when the balkor is laning, but if it's between chapters or between aliyahs, it's okay. But the question was, if it's between verse and verse, can you leave? So my question was, it's very hard to leave between a verse. I mean, you know how people lane. It's very hard to time it that you can leave exactly. So I didn't see how that was actually physically possible. And if you needed to leave, of course you'd have to leave. We know that Pikuach Nefesh or Shasat Chak in some kind of a pressing circumstance, you're allowed to do a lot worse than that. A lot of other violations of Torah that are explicit violations, not just that. So I didn't see how it was actually practically relevant or would ever actually come up, but that was the first teiku, so that's why it's interesting. And we are told that the teikus will be answered when the Messiah comes. And Elijah the prophet will answer the teikus, and so he writes that you need to know the questions to get to actually ask the questions. And so this is the 237th, and there's according to his book there's 317 teikus. So we're well over halfway there. Actually, we're think we're over 2/3 there. Let's see here. 1/3 would be 106, 212. Yeah, we're in the last third. So that's pretty exciting. Anyway, all that, yeah, Teku, that's why. So we finished the Teku, and now we are at a new Mishnah. Okay. The Mishnah says, "Hakomet miyuta me'akev is a little boy. Yisach miyuta me'akev is a little boy. Hayayin miyuta me'akev is a little boy. Yashem miyuta me'akev is a little boy." With regard to the handful, failure to sacrifice the minority of it prevents the majority of it, which was sacrificed, from rendering it permitted for the priests to consume the remainder of the meal offering. With regard to 1/10 of an ephah of flour brought as a meal offering, failure to sacrifice the minority of it presents the majority of it, which was sacrificed, from qualifying as a proper meal offering. With regard to the wine poured as a libation, failure to pour the minority of it presents the majority of it, which was poured, from qualifying a proper libation. With regard to the log of oil, which is required in the meal offering, failure to add the majority of it prevents the majority of it, which was added, from being a sufficient measure of oil. With regard to the fine flour and the oil, failure to bring each prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah with each other. With regard to the handful and the frankincense, failure to burn prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah with the other. Okay, that's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara. Zog Nehelig Talmud, my time, and what's the reason? What is the reason that the failure to sacrifice the minority of the handfuls disqualifies the entire offering? What is the reason for the season? What is the reason that the failure to sacrifice the minority of the handful disqualifies the entire offering? This is derived from the fact that the verse states his handful twice, kumso twice, once with regard to the voluntary meal offering, Leviticus 2, verse 2, and once with regard to the meal offering of a sinner, Leviticus 5:12. And any halacha repeated in the verses is deemed indispensable. Isaroi miutu me'akayev es ruboi ma'itaimi. Omakro misalta. Shimcha sakol shubesulo. The Mishnah teaches with regard to 1/10 of an ephah of flour brought as a meal offering, failure to sacrifice the minority of it prevents the majority of it from qualifying as a proper meal offering. What is the reason? The verse states, the priest shall remove of it a handful of its fine flour. Leviticus 2, verse 2. The usage of the term of its fine flour instead of the fine flour teaches that if any amount of its flour was missing, it is not valid. The Mishnah teaches with regard to the wine poured as a libation, failure to pour the minority presents the majority of it from qualifying as a proper libation. What is the reason? The verse states concerning the libation, so shall it be done. Numbers 15:11. The term so indicates that the libations must be sacrificed exactly in the manner described without any deviation. The Mishnah teaches with regard to the log of oil that is required for the meal offering, failure to add the minority of it prevents the majority of it from being a sufficient measure of oil. In the case of oil, the meal offering that accompanies libations, as halacha has learned from the term so, Numbers 15:11, stated with regard to the libations, and in the case of the log of oil that accompanies a voluntary meal offering, the verse states, and of its oil, Leviticus 2:2, demonstrating that if any amount of its oil is missing, it is not valid. The Mishnah teaches with regard to the fine flour and oil, failure to bring each prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah with the other. The halacha that each is indispensable is derived from the fact that the two are juxtaposed in the verse. The priest shall remove of it a handful of its fine flour and of its oil. Leviticus 2 verse 2. And the fact that this requirement is repeated in the verse of its groats and of its oil. Leviticus 2:16 teaches that each is indispensable. The Mishnah teaches with regard to the handful and the frankincense, failure to burn each prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah. With the other, the halacha that each is indispensable is derived from the repetition of the mention of the two together in the verse, as it is written, the priest shall remove of it a handful of its fine flour and of its oil, as well as all of its frankincense. Leviticus 2 verse 2. And again, with regard to the meal offering of a sinner, it is stated, and all the frankincense which is upon the meal offering. Leviticus 6 verse 8. That's the Gemara. New Mishnah. No Mishnah, no Mishnah, no Mishnah. Nine, 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 nine. Okay. Zog de Mishneh. Shnei Sirei Yom Kippurim merk b'zeh zeh. Shnei kivsei atzeres merk b'zeh zeh. Shtei chalois miakvois zo zo. With regard to the two goats of Yom Kippur, the absence of each goat prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah with the other. With regard to the two sheep brought together with the meal offering of the two loaves on Shavuot, failure to bring each of the sheep prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah with the other. With regard to the two loaves brought on Shavuot, failure to bring each of the loaves prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah with the other. Shnei sidorim yakbin zeh, shnei bazichim yakbin zeh, ha-sidorim va-bazichim yakbin zeh. With regard to the two arrangements of the showbread, failure to place each of the arrangements prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah with the other. With regard to the two bowls of frankincense that accompanies the showbread, failure to place each of the bowls prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah with the other. With regard to the arrangements of the showbread and the bowls of frankincense, failure to bring each of them prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah with each other. Shnei minim shebenazil, shloisha sheva horom, ve'arba'a sheva toida, ve'arba'a sheva lulav, ve'arba'a sheva mitzoiro, me'akvin zeh zeh. With regard to the two types of loaves that accompany the offerings of a Nazirite, the bread and wafers, see number 615, the three species that are part of the rite of the red heifer. Can't see here, red heifer. Red heifer has a numerical value of 78. But a red heifer is equal to 79. Okay, good to know. All right, the rite of the red heifer, the cedar, hyssop, and scarlet wool. The cedar, hyssop, and scarlet wool, see Numbers 19 verse 6. And the four types of loaves. Excuse me. That accompany the thanks offering, the loaves, the wafers, loaves soaked in hot water, and leavened bread, see Leviticus 7:12, and the four species of the lulav. The lulav, the esrog, the myrtle, and the willow, see Leviticus 23:40, and the four species that are used in the purification process of the leper. The cedar, hyssop, scarlet wool, and birds. Ay, 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 ay. cedar, hyssop, scarlet wool, and birds. This is very important, very important, very important. Equals 380. Beautiful. 380 is Lubavitch. See Leviticus 14, verse 4. The failure to bring each of the components prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah with the other. Sheva zois, sheva pohamak, lizoizo. Sheva zois, shial ben abadim. Shial aporoiches. Shial mizbeach hazol, me'ak vizoizo. With regard to the 7 sprinklings of the blood of the red heifer that the priest sprinkles opposite the entrance to the sanctuary, in the sanctuary. See Numbers 19:4. Failure to sprinkle each prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah with the others. With regard to the 7 sprinklings of the blood of the bull and goat of Yom Kippur that are sprinkled on the ark between the staves. See Leviticus 16:14, 15, and 7 sprinklings that are sprinkled on the curtain, separating the sanctuary and the Holy of Holies, and the sprinklings that are sprinkled on the golden altar on Yom Kippur. And from all the inner sin offerings, failure to sprinkle each prevents the fulfillment of the mitzvah with the others. Gemara. That's the Mishnah, now the Talmud. Zok the Talmud. Shnei Sicha Yom Kippurim Makriv Zeh Chuko. The Mishnah teaches with regard to the 2 goats of Yom Kippur, the absence of each goat prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah. With the other, this is derived from the verse that states with regard to the Yom Kippur service, and it shall be a statute forever. Leviticus 16:29. Since wherever the term statute appears concerning a sacrificial rite, it signifies that the rite is an indispensable requirement. Shnei kivsei etzeres mi'akvin zeh havaya shnechalois havaya. The Mishnah teaches with regard to the 2 sheep brought together with the meal offering. Excuse me. A little froggy this morning. Where were we? The Mishnah teaches with regard to the 2 sheep brought together with the meal offering of the 2 loaves on Shavuot. Failure to bring each of the sheep prevents the fulfillment of the mitzvah with the other. This is derived from the verse, they shall be holy, Leviticus 23:20. Since the employment of the term of being, havaya, indicates an indispensable requirement, similarly with regard to the 2 loaves brought on Shavuot, the reason failure to bring each of the loaves prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah with the other is that the verse states, they shall be of fine flour. Leviticus 23:17, employing the term of being Shnei Sidorim, Chuka, Shnei Bazichin, Chuka, Hasidorin, Vabazichin, Chuka. With regard to the 2 arrangements of the showbread, the reason failure to bring each of the arrangements prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah with the other is that the verse employs the term statute concerning them. See Leviticus 24, verse 9. With regard to the 2 bowls of frankincense that accompany the showbread, the reason failure to place each of the bowls prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah. With the other, the verse employs a term statute concerning them. See Leviticus 24, verse 9, with regard to the arrangements of the showbread and the bowls of frankincense. The reason failure to bring each of them prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah. With the other is that the verse employs a term statute concerning them, as that verse addresses each of these two components. Shnei minim shebenazir dichsiv chen yaseh shlosha sheba parachuga. With regard to the two types of loaves that accompany the offerings of a Nazarite, each prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah. With others, as it is written with regard to the Nazarite, so he must do after the law of his Nazariteship, Numbers 6:21, demonstrating that he must bring his offerings precisely as detailed in the verse. With regard to the three species that are part of the rite of the red heifer, each prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah with the others, since the term statute is written about them. This is a statute of the law. Numbers 19, verse 2. Arba Shabbatoido di'iskat dakash denozir dichsiv al zevach toida shlomov yomamar shlomov l'rabois shalmei nozil. With regard to the four types of loaves that accompany the thanks offering, each prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah with the others, since the thanks offering is juxtaposed to the offerings of a Nazarite, as it is written with regard to the thanks offering with the sacrifice of his peace offerings for Thanksgiving, Leviticus 7:13. And the Master says the term his peace offerings serve to include the loaves of the peace offering of a Nazarite. And it has already been demonstrated that with regard to the loaves that accompany the offerings of a Nazarite, each prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah. With the others, Hamitzoiro Ve'arba Shebalulav Ulekachtem Lekichatama. And with regard to the four species that are in the purification process of the leper, each prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah with the others, as it is written, this shall be the law of the leper, Leviticus 14:2, and the term shall be Zot Tiyeh indicates as indispensable requirement. And with regard to the four species of the lulav, each prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah with the others, as the verse states, and you shall take, Leviticus 23, verse 40, which alludes to a complete taking, comprising all four species. Not spices, but species. Amar Chanan bar Rabba, lo shanu, ela she'en loi, aval yesh le'im me'akrim. The Rav Chanan bar Rava says, the Mishnah taught the four species of the lulav were necessary for the fulfillment of the mitzvah only in the case where one did not have all four species. But if one had all four species, failure to take each of the components does not prevent the fulfillment of the mitzvah with the others, and he fulfills the mitzvah by taking each of the species individually. This reminds me of Roy Labila. It's the same idea. Kol Roy Labila. It's Ein Makvim. And if it's not Roy Labila, then it is Makvim. Same idea. Seems like to me. Meis v'yam aminin shbalulav shnayim mehem ois v'peirois shnayim mehem v'peirois ois v'peirois use the cooking chain ois and peirois use the cooking ois and peirois v'ein adav yoitzi yedei chavosoi boyen ad shehu kuran aguda achas. The Gemara raises an objection from a Braita. With regard to the four species of the lulav, two of them, the lulav and the etrog, produce fruit, and two of them, the myrtle and the willow, do not produce fruit. Those that produce fruit have a bond with those that do not produce fruit, and those that do not produce fruit have a bond with those that produce fruit. And a person does not fulfill his obligation of taking the lulav until they're all bound together in a single bundle. עד שיהיו כולם באגודה אחת, שנאמר הבוינה בשמיים על יוסף, מעלותיו, ואגודתו על הארץ יסדה. הבונה בשמיים מעלותיו. הקורא המים על יוסף. Something like that. Like barking nafshi. Reminds me of that. So too, when the Jewish people fast and pray for acceptance of their repentance, this is not accomplished until they are all bound together in a single bundle, as it is stated. It is he that builds his upper chambers in the heaven and has established his bundle upon the earth. Amos 9:6. Which is interpreted as stating that only when the Jewish people are bound together are they established upon the earth. This Braita contradicts Rav Hanan Barov's statement, since it teaches that the four species of lulav must be taken together in order for one to fulfill his obligation of taking of the lulav. Tanai Tanya lulav bein agud bein shenu agud kosher. Rabbi Yehuda Omer agud kosher shenu agud pasul. The Gemara answers, whether the different species must be taken together is a dispute between Tanaim. As it is taught in a Braita, lulav, whether it is bound with a myrtle and willow or whether it is not bound, it is fit. Rabbi Yehuda says, if it is bound, it is fit. If it is not bound, it is not fit. Okay. My time, Rabbi Yehuda. Gamar kicha megudas ezoiv. The Gemara asks, what is the reason of Rabbi Yehuda? The Gemara answers, by means of a verbal analogy. He derives the term taking, written with regard to the four species, from the term taking written with regard to the bundle of hyssop. It is written there in the context of the sacrifice of the Paschal offering in Egypt. Take a bundle of hyssop, Exodus 12:22. And it is written here with regard to the four species, and you shall take for you on the first day the fruit of a beautiful tree, branches of a date palm, boughs of dense-leaved trees, and willows of the brook. Leviticus 23:40. Malalan be'aguda, afkan be'aguda, rabon legamri kicha kicha. Just as there, with regard to the Paschal offering, the mitzvah to take hyssop is specifically in a bundle, so to here the mitzvah to take four species is specifically in a bundle. The Gemara asks, and what is the reasoning of the rabbis? The Gemara answers, they do not derive the meaning of the term taking from the meaning of the term taking by means of the verbal analogy. They don't darshan it. Kemanazla haditani lulav mitzvah lagodoi. Lo yagodoi kosher kemani Rabbi Yehuda lo yagodoi amai kosher yirvon my mitzvah. The Gemara asks, in accordance with whose opinion is that which is taught in Braita? There is a mitzvah to bind the myrtle and the willow together with lulav, but if one did not bind it, it is fit. In accordance with whose opinion is this Braita? If it is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, if one did not bind it, why is it fit? If it is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis, what mitzvah is one fulfilling by binding it? The Gemara answers, actually is in accordance with the opinion of the rabbis, and what mitzvah is one fulfilling? The mitzvah is due to the fact that it is stated, this is my God and I will beautify him, Exodus 15:2, which is interpreted to mean that one should beautify himself before God in the present performance of the mitzvot. The rabbis agree that although failure to bind the three species does not render them unfit for performing the mitzvah, the performance of the mitzvah is more beautiful when the lulav is bound. The Mishnah teaches with regard to 7 sprinklings of the blood of the heifer that the priest sprinkles opposite the entrance to the sanctuary. Failure to sprinkle each prevents the fulfillment of the mitzvah with the others, since the term statute is written about them. See Numbers 19, verse 2. Sheva zois shal ben abadim v'shal mizbach hazo v'shal paroiches. The Mishnah further teaches with regard to the 7 sprinklings of the blood of the bull and goat of Yom Kippur that are sprinkled on the ark between the staves, and the sprinklings that are sprinkled on the golden altar on Yom Kippur, and the sprinklings from all the other inner sin offerings that are sprinkled on the golden altar, and the 7 sprinklings that are sprinkled on the curtain separating the sanctuary and the Holy of Holies. Failure to sprinkle each prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah with the others. With regard to the sprinklings of Yom Kippur, the reason that each prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah with the others is that the term statute is written about the Yom Kippur service. See Leviticus 16:29. Dipar kohen meshuach udipar helim dovor shel tzibur. Now returning to 27b. With regard to the sprinklings of the bull of anointed priest, meaning the high priest, and of the bull for an unwitting communal sin, and for those of goats of idol worship, which are sprinkled on the curtain and on the golden altar, the reason that each prevents fulfillment of the mitzvah with the others is as taught in the Braita. The verse states with regard to the bull for an unwitting communal sin, so shall he do with the bull, as he did with the bull of the sin offering of the anointed priest. Leviticus 4:20. Why must the verse state that the bull offering for an unwitting communal sin is sacrificed in the same manner as the bull of the anointed priest, when the Torah has already explicitly specified the manner in which the service should take place? The reason it states it is in order to repeat the command of the sprinklings. Turning to 27b now, to teach that if one omitted one of the placements of blood, he has done nothing. He has done nothing.